Hello everyone, welcome to Sleep Space. Tonight, we're going to explore a question that drifts between science, philosophy, and mystery. Does consciousness leave the body at night? When you close your eyes and drift off to sleep, where does your awareness go? It's one of those questions that sound simple until you really start thinking about it, because for a third of your life, you're essentially unconscious. Yet somehow you return every morning, remembering who you are, what you were doing, and where you left off. But if your consciousness truly stays inside your brain, why does it feel so separate from the physical world when you dream? Why does it seem to exist somewhere else entirely? To begin, let's explore what we actually mean by consciousness. Scientists can describe the brain's electrical signals, its firing neurons, and its chemical messengers. They can measure awareness in terms of brain activity and neural networks, but none of that fully explains what it feels like to be you. That inner movie of thoughts, emotions, and memories playing behind your eyes. What is it really? Some philosophers have argued that consciousness might be a fundamental property of the universe, not something that merely emerges from matter. That's a radical idea, but it helps explain why we can't find a clear boundary between physical activity in the brain and subjective experience. If consciousness is more like a field that the brain tunes into, then maybe when we sleep, that field temporarily changes its frequency. When you fall asleep, the brain transitions through a complex symphony of stages. Alpha waves give way to slower theta waves, and eventually to the deep, rhythmic delta waves of dreamless sleep. During this process, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for logic, decision-making, and self-awareness, begins to quiet down. That's one reason dreams can feel so bizarre yet convincing. The critical part of your mind is taking a break. But something fascinating happens during REM sleep, the stage when most dreaming occurs. Your brain becomes highly active again, almost as if you were awake, yet your body is completely paralyzed. The only muscles that move are those controlling your eyes and breathing. It's a paradoxical state. The mind is awake, the body is asleep. If you think about it, that might be the closest natural state we have to an out-of-body experience. Your physical self is immobile, lying still in bed, while your mind roams freely through entire worlds of its own making. You can fly, speak to long-lost loved ones, even move through strange cities that don't exist. For those moments, it feels as if your awareness is somewhere else, untethered from the flesh and bone that anchor you to waking reality. Neuroscience explains this as the brain's internal simulation, running at full speed without sensory input. But to someone inside the experience, it feels vividly real. Throughout history, many cultures have interpreted this nighttime journey differently. Ancient Egyptians believed the soul, or Ba, would leave the body during sleep, traveling through the world of dreams before returning at dawn. The Greeks spoke of the psyche wandering between realms, visiting the land of the dead and the divine. Indigenous traditions from many parts of the world describe dreams as voyages, times when the spirit leaves the body to learn, heal, or communicate with ancestors. While science today interprets these stories metaphorically, they reveal a universal intuition that something profound happens to consciousness when we sleep. In modern times, experiences like astral projection and lucid dreaming have reignited this question in new ways. People who claim to have out-of-body experiences describe floating above their sleeping form, moving through their house, or even traveling to distant places. Many report seeing details they could not have known consciously, like an object placed out of view or a conversation in another room. Skeptics argue these are elaborate hallucinations produced by brain-blending dream imagery with fragments of waking perception. Yet even some neuroscientists admit they don't fully understand why these experiences can feel more real than waking life itself. Studies on near-death experiences provide another layer of intrigue. When people's hearts stop and their brains lose measurable activity, some later report floating outside their bodies, watching doctors work to revive them. Others describe moving through tunnels of light or encountering deceased loved ones. While many researchers attribute these to chemical reactions and hypoxia, the sheer vividness and consistency of these accounts raise a deeper question. Does consciousness depend entirely on the living brain, or can it exist separately, even briefly? If we strip away the mystical language, both sleep and near-death experiences might be touching different sides of the same phenomenon: the separation of consciousness from sensory reality. During sleep, the brain disconnects from external input, and your mind becomes the creator of its own world. During near-death experiences, that same disconnection occurs, but the body is no longer maintaining normal function. In both cases, awareness seems to drift away from its usual boundaries. Some neuroscientists believe this sense of leaving the body is an illusion created by the temporoparietal junction, a region of the brain that integrates visual, spatial, and bodily sensations. When its activity is disrupted by trauma, sensory deprivation, or deep sleep, it can cause a person to feel detached from their physical form. Experiments have shown that stimulating this area can even induce out-of-body sensations in fully awake participants. In that view, your consciousness never truly leaves your body. It only feels that way when your brain's internal map of self and space becomes unstable. But other theories push beyond this purely biological explanation. Quantum consciousness models, though controversial, suggest that the mind might interact with quantum processes in the brain's microtubules, tiny structures inside neurons that could be sensitive to the subtle fabric of reality. If that's true, consciousness might not be confined by the physical boundaries of the skull. Instead, it could resonate or extend through fields that science hasn't yet fully defined. While there's no consensus on this, it opens a fascinating door. Maybe sleep isn't just a biological process, but a nightly shift in the way consciousness interacts with reality. There's something humbling about realizing how little we actually know about awareness itself. Every night we surrender to sleep, letting go of the waking world, trusting that we'll return. During that time, your brain cycles through countless patterns, but you, the experiencer, fade into the background. Then, at some point, a dream begins, and you find yourself somewhere else entirely. Maybe standing in a place you've never been, speaking to someone you thought was gone. For that moment, your sense of being a person in a body disappears. You're not lying in bed. You're flying, falling, speaking, existing. Where is that happening? Inside the brain? Or somewhere beyond it? When we wake, we say the dream wasn't real, but from the inside, it felt real. And that's the paradox at the heart of consciousness. It creates worlds that feel solid, experiences that seem tangible, and emotions that leave real effects on the body. If you wake from a nightmare, your heart races, your palms sweat, your muscles tense. The experience might have happened in your head, but your body reacts as if it were physical. The line between internal and external begins to blur. Some researchers suggest that sleep might serve as a reset for consciousness itself. Just as your body restores energy, perhaps your awareness rebalances, disconnecting from the physical world to reorganize in some deeper, unseen layer of reality. Others see it as the brain's way of maintaining stability, giving the self a chance to dissolve and rebuild each day. Either way, the process is remarkable. You lose awareness of your surroundings, drift into other worlds, and then return with a renewed sense of you. So tonight, as we explore this question further, keep this thought in mind. Consciousness might not be something you have. It might be something you are. And what you are may not be as confined as it seems. Perhaps the body is more like an anchor, holding you in place within one level of reality. And when you sleep, that anchor loosens just enough for your awareness to drift, to explore, to imagine, to expand. Whether that's a purely biological phenomenon or something that touches the edge of the unknown, it remains one of the greatest mysteries of being alive. When you begin to drift into sleep, something extraordinary happens that we rarely notice. The steady rhythm of waking life, the chatter of thoughts, the awareness of time, the sense of being a self moving through space, slowly begins to dissolve. You can almost feel your mind slipping beneath the surface of awareness, as if you're descending into a quiet ocean. This descent is far more complex than it appears. It's not just the body shutting down for rest, it's a total transformation of consciousness itself. And that transformation might hold the key to understanding whether consciousness ever truly leaves the body. Science has made great progress in mapping the mechanics of sleep. We know that as you close your eyes, the brain's thalamus begins to reduce its filtering of sensory information. The cortex, which usually processes signals from the outside world, starts to quiet down. You stop perceiving the environment and begin turning inward. In that sense, your consciousness is already retreating from physical reality. It's still within the brain, but it's no longer bound by external input. It's beginning to create its own reality. If consciousness is like a spotlight during the day, focused on the outer world, it becomes more like a lantern at night, illuminating inner landscapes that exist nowhere else. Some neuroscientists suggest that during this shift, your brain enters what they call an offline mode. Instead of responding to what's happening around you, it starts replaying and reorganizing information, forming dreams, strengthening memories, and even exploring hypothetical situations. From a purely biological standpoint, your consciousness never leaves the brain. It simply reconfigures its focus inward, but from your own perspective, it can feel like stepping into an entirely different dimension. There's an idea in philosophy known as the simulation of presence. It proposes that the brain continuously constructs a model of the world and of the self existing within it. When you're awake, this model aligns with sensory data. You feel your body's weight against the chair, see the light in the room, hear your surroundings. But when you sleep, that model persists even without input. The brain doesn't stop simulating, it just no longer has to match external reality. The result is the dream world, a fully immersive simulation where consciousness continues to exist, but no longer tethered to the same physical rules. This raises a subtle but profound question. If your sense of self can persist without real sensory input, does that mean consciousness itself is more fundamental than the body it inhabits? It's as if the brain is a receiver, and while awake, it tunes to the frequency of the physical world. When you sleep, it changes channels, still receiving, still broadcasting awareness, but from another band of existence. Whether that frequency is simply a neural construct or something deeper remains a mystery. Throughout human history, moments of detachment from the body have been reported under many circumstances, not just sleep. Meditation, sensory deprivation, extreme physical stress, and near-death experiences all seem to loosen the same boundary between the inner self and the physical form. Yogic traditions describe states of samadhi, where the practitioner feels awareness expanding beyond the limits of the body. Shamans speak of spirit journeys, entering altered states to explore non-ordinary realms. In all these accounts, there's a recurring theme. Consciousness seems capable of shifting its point of view independently of the body. Modern neuroscience often interprets this as a change in brain function, not an actual departure of the self. But what's fascinating is how these reports share consistent features across cultures and eras. People describe floating, traveling, or observing themselves from above. They speak of feeling weightless, timeless, and completely detached from ordinary physical reality. Could all these experiences be mere byproducts of altered brain chemistry? Or do they hint that consciousness might have a broader range than we assume? To explore that possibility, let's look more closely at what happens in the brain when you dream. During REM sleep, your visual cortex becomes as active as when you're awake, even though your eyes are closed. The emotional centers, like the amygdala and limbic system, also become more engaged. which may explain why dreams often carry such intense feelings. Yet the logical parts of your brain, particularly the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, go quiet. This means that while your mind is creating vivid experiences, it's not questioning their reality. That lack of skepticism allows the dream world to feel real in every sense. Now, if you become aware that you're dreaming, a lucid dream, something remarkable occurs. Your prefrontal cortex reactivates, allowing conscious control. You can make decisions, change the scenery, or fly through dreamscapes at will. In these moments, it feels as if you have transcended the physical world entirely. Some lucid dreamers describe leaving their dream bodies and floating upward, observing their sleeping forms below. The sensation is so strikingly similar to classic out-of-body experiences that researchers have begun studying whether lucid dreaming might serve as a bridge between dreaming and conscious exploration of altered states. Interestingly, brain scans show that when people report floating or seeing themselves from above, activity in the temporoparietal junction decreases or shifts asymmetrically. This region integrates information about your body's position in space. When it's disrupted, your internal map of me in the world becomes unstable. It's like your consciousness loses its coordinates. And when that happens, you feel as if you're no longer confined within your body. But even though neuroscience can identify the mechanism, it still can't explain why this produces such a vivid sense of separation, or why it feels so profoundly real. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of these experiences is how they blur the boundary between what's physical and what's experiential. The body remains still, the brain is active, yet your awareness seems to drift elsewhere, perceiving from a different vantage point. Whether that elsewhere exists only in the brain or in a different dimension of reality is something no experiment has definitively answered. But consider this: everything you perceive, even now, is ultimately generated within your consciousness. You don't experience the world directly, you experience your brain's reconstruction of it. So when you dream or feel yourself leaving your body, the experience is just as internally generated as everything you perceive while awake. The only difference is that your brain is no longer anchored to external signals. But what if those experiences aren't just illusions? What if consciousness truly has the capacity to project awareness beyond the body, even if only temporarily? Some physicists have suggested that consciousness might be a non-local phenomenon, not restricted to space and time the way matter is. It could be part of a broader field of reality, like gravity or electromagnetism, something that interacts with the physical world but isn't contained within it. If that's true, then the leaving of consciousness might not mean traveling through space, but rather shifting its focus from one layer of reality to another. We see hints of this in stories of deep meditation, near-death experiences, and even creative insight. In those moments when the body seems irrelevant, consciousness expands into something boundless. It perceives without eyes, understands without language, and feels connected to everything. Some researchers call this the non-dual state, a mode of awareness where subject and object merge, and the distinction between inner and outer dissolves. If such states are accessible during waking life, perhaps sleep provides a natural entry point into them. There's also evidence suggesting that the dreaming mind might access information in unusual ways. People have reported solving problems in dreams that they couldn't in waking life. Scientists, artists, and inventors alike. Paul McCartney claimed the melody of Yesterday came to him in a dream. The chemist Friedrich Kekulé envisioned the ring structure of benzene after dreaming of a snake eating its tail. These moments raise the possibility that the mind, freed from the constraints of sensory reality, can explore patterns and connections beyond ordinary awareness. That exploration might feel like leaving the body, but perhaps it's more accurate to say consciousness is expanding into its full potential. So when you drift into sleep, you're not just losing awareness of the external world, you're entering a vast, dynamic inner space that may be just as real in its own way. The brain provides the doorway, but consciousness might be the traveler. Whether it stays confined within neural circuits or extends beyond them is still an open question. Yet every night, when you surrender to that descent, you're engaging in one of the oldest mysteries of existence, the daily disappearance and reappearance of awareness. If consciousness truly does have the power to move beyond the body, then perhaps the boundaries we perceive between waking and dreaming, between here and there, between now and then, are not as fixed as we think and elsewhere, are only partial illusions. Maybe the mind is not something that lives inside the body, but something the body lives within. Each night, as you fall asleep, your awareness might not vanish at all. It might simply step sideways into another realm of reality, one that has been with you all along, just beyond the threshold of waking thought. If you've ever had that strange moment between waking and sleep where you feel your body paralyzed but your mind completely awake, you've experienced one of the most mysterious transitions consciousness can take. This in-between state, often called sleep paralysis, is both terrifying and enlightening. Your awareness is active, observing, sensing, but your body refuses to respond. Many people describe feeling a presence in the room, a pressure on the chest, or even the sensation of floating above themselves. From a physiological standpoint, this is simply the brain awakening before the body does. But to those inside the experience, it feels as though consciousness has truly stepped outside its physical home. Moments like these reveal just how fragile the boundary is between the mental and the physical. In one sense, you're lying perfectly still. In another, you're moving freely in a realm untethered from your body. If consciousness can operate independently from movement or sensory input, then perhaps it doesn't rely as completely on the physical vessel as we assume. It might be something more fluid, something that can shift its center of gravity depending on the state of the brain. In ancient times, this borderland between wakefulness and sleep was considered sacred. The Greeks called it hypnagogia, a threshold where dreams and reality merge. Artists and thinkers often sought inspiration from it. Thomas Edison famously held a metal ball in his hand while napping in a chair. When he drifted off, the ball would fall and wake him, capturing the fleeting visions between sleep and wakefulness. Salvador Dalí used a similar technique, claiming that his most surreal ideas emerged in this half-dreaming state. What they were both accessing might be described as a partial uncoupling of consciousness. A moment when the mind loosens its ties to physical perception and begins to wander freely through imagination. This threshold may be the most natural example of how consciousness detaches. It isn't an all-or-nothing event. It's a gradient, a slow peeling away of layers. The sensory layer fades first, then the awareness of time, then the sense of being located within a body. What remains is pure awareness, an observer without form. In deep meditation or lucid dreaming, people sometimes reach this same point intentionally. They describe it as a sensation of being awareness itself, no longer confined to the body, but still existing vividly. Science can map the brain states associated with these moments, but it cannot explain why they feel so expansive, so free. This brings us to a fascinating idea emerging in modern consciousness studies. The notion that the brain doesn't produce consciousness, it filters it. Just as a radio tunes into certain frequencies while ignoring others, the brain may focus awareness into a narrow, coherent stream suited for physical survival. During sleep or altered states, that filter might loosen, allowing access to broader dimensions of mind. The philosopher Henry Bergson once suggested that the brain acts as a kind of reducing valve, preventing us from being overwhelmed by the full spectrum of reality. If he was right, then sleep could be the moment that valve opens slightly, letting consciousness expand beyond the everyday boundaries of perception. This filtering model has subtle but profound implications. It suggests that consciousness might be universal, not individual, a vast field of awareness that every mind draws from, like drops from the same ocean. Your body and brain shape how that consciousness expresses itself, but they don't create it. Instead, they limit it to what's necessary for physical life. If that's true, then when we sleep, our awareness might drift closer to its source, reconnecting briefly with that wider field. What feels like leaving the body could simply be consciousness remembering its true, boundless nature. Many spiritual traditions echo this idea. In Hindu philosophy, consciousness, Atman, is not separate from the ultimate reality, Brahman. The body is a temporary vessel. The self, in its deepest form, is universal. Tibetan Buddhism describes sleep as a practice ground for death, a time when consciousness naturally detaches from sensory experience, preparing for the transition between lives. Even in Christianity, the concept of the soul resting or ascending at night appears in early mystic writings. Across all these traditions, there's an underlying unity, the idea that sleep is more than a biological function. It's a return to a subtler plane of existence. From a scientific perspective, this might sound poetic, but there are clues that point toward deeper connections. For instance, during REM sleep, the patterns of brain activity bear striking similarities to those seen in deep meditation. In both states, the default mode network, responsible for the narrative of self, becomes less dominant, allowing other regions of the brain to communicate more freely. This neural openness might explain the sense of expansion people report, as if the boundaries of identity dissolve. It's not necessarily that consciousness leaves the body, but that it stops being limited to the idea of being in one. We can also consider the perspective of quantum theory, though cautiously. Some scientists, like Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, propose that consciousness might arise from quantum processes within neurons, specifically within microscopic structures called microtubules. These quantum events could, in theory, be entangled with larger fields beyond the brain. If true, then consciousness might have non-local properties. It could exist in multiple places or states simultaneously. Sleep, by quieting ordinary brain activity, might allow these deeper layers of awareness to surface. While this remains a speculative frontier, it offers one way to imagine how consciousness could extend beyond physical boundaries without defying natural law. There's also the intriguing question of shared dreams and mutual experiences during sleep. Though rare and difficult to verify scientifically, countless people have reported dreaming of the same event or person simultaneously. Twins, couples, and close friends sometimes describe waking from identical or overlapping dreams. From a skeptical standpoint, these could be coincidences or the result of subconscious cues, but they might also hint at some form of interconnection between minds when ordinary consciousness is loosened from physical constraints. If minds can resonate like tuning forks, subtly influencing one another, then sleep could be a nightly window into that hidden network of awareness. It's worth remembering that consciousness is not a static thing. It's dynamic, changing moment by moment. You can observe this even as you drift towards sleep. First, your thoughts start to dissolve into fragments. Then those fragments become images. Soon, the images blur into fully formed scenes. Each shift marks a different balance between brain regions, different levels of coherence between the waking mind and the dreamer within. When those connections alter, so does the sense of self. You don't feel like you've left your body in a dream. You simply no longer notice the body at all. Awareness detaches naturally, effortlessly. This detachment might be the brain's way of simulating other forms of existence. Dreaming could serve as a kind of rehearsal for expanded states of consciousness, states that might occur during near-death experiences, deep meditation, or even moments of profound creativity. By exploring the boundaries of awareness each night, the mind learns how to navigate existence itself. It learns how to let go. Consider the famous mirror test for self-awareness used in animals. When a chimp or dolphin recognizes itself in a reflection, we say it has a sense of self. But in dreams, you can act, speak, and think without remembering who you are at all. Sometimes you play a completely different role, a stranger, a child, a version of yourself from another life, yet you remain conscious. This shows that consciousness can persist even when the self, the mental construct tied to your physical identity is gone. It suggests that awareness itself might not depend on the body or even on memory. So where does this leave us? Perhaps consciousness doesn't leave the body in the spatial sense. Instead, it detaches from the illusion of being confined. The body becomes background noise, while awareness explores other possibilities of existence. The same consciousness that observes the world through your eyes by day becomes the dreamer creating entire worlds by night. The traveller and the landscape are one and the same. That idea can be both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because it implies you're more than your body. Your awareness is vast, resilient, and timeless. Unsettling because it blurs the line between reality and imagination, between the physical and the non-physical. Yet maybe those lines were never as solid as we thought. The more we study the mind, the more we discover that perception, memory, and identity are all fluid constructs. And if that's true, then the nightly departure of consciousness isn't a mystery to fear, but a natural expression of what you truly are, a being capable of existing in more than one world. Every night, as you surrender to sleep, your body remains here, but your awareness steps into infinity. It's not traveling outward through space, it's diving inward, into the vast ocean of mind from which all experience arises. And when morning comes, you surface again, carrying fragments of that ocean back into the waking world. Bits of insight, emotion, and wonder that remind you that your consciousness is far greater than the limits of flesh. When the body sleeps, the universe doesn't stop. The air continues to move, the earth spins, stars burn light years away, and the brain, though cut off from sensory reality, keeps humming like a quiet city at night. But what's remarkable is that you, the conscious observer, are absent for much of it. Hours pass, and yet you don't experience their passing. When you finally wake, it's as if time itself skipped. That absence, the gap where awareness disappears, is one of the most mysterious aspects of human existence. Because if consciousness truly depends on the brain's constant activity, how can it vanish and return so seamlessly? Where does it go when it's gone? Scientists often describe this as a state change, like turning off a light and then turning it back on. But consciousness doesn't quite behave like a switch. It's more like a current that sometimes flows through awareness and sometimes doesn't. When you dream, the current surges again, illuminating worlds within your mind. But in deep, dreamless sleep, it seems to go completely dark. In that dark space, no images, no thoughts, no sensations, just nothingness. Yet somehow, from that nothingness, the sense of I am returns every morning. This cycle of disappearance and reappearance has puzzled both mystics and neuroscientists for centuries. Eastern philosophies have long viewed this nightly cycle as a clue to the nature of the self. In Hinduism, the Upanishads describe 3 states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. And beyond them, a 4th state called turiya, the ever-present awareness that underlies all experience. According to that view, even when you're unconscious, a deeper level of consciousness persists. Pure awareness without content. You don't perceive it because perception itself requires duality. Something to observe and someone to observe it. But turiya is beyond duality. It's the silent witness that remains even when the mind and body are still. In this framework, sleep doesn't extinguish consciousness. It simply withdraws it from the sensory world. Interestingly, this idea has found echoes in modern research on the brain's default mode network, DMN, a system of interconnected regions active when you're not focused on the outside world, when you're daydreaming, imagining, or introspecting. During deep meditation and slow-wave sleep, activity in the DMN drastically reduces. It's as if the usual chatter of the mind goes silent, yet beneath that silence, neural synchrony increases. Vast regions of the brain pulse together in rhythmic harmony. Some researchers speculate that this coherence could represent a baseline state of awareness, a kind of unified consciousness beneath all thought? If so, it may be that when you lose consciousness at night, what really happens is that the surface level self dissolves, revealing a deeper, more fundamental layer of being. What's particularly fascinating is that this state, though seemingly unconscious, can be remembered under certain conditions. Advanced meditators have reported remaining aware during deep sleep, not dreaming, not thinking, but resting in pure awareness. They describe it as existing without form, a vast stillness beyond sensation or identity. Neuroscientific studies on such practitioners show unusual brainwave patterns, slow oscillations combined with traces of high-frequency gamma activity, suggesting that a subtle form of consciousness can indeed persist even when the ordinary mind is offline. If this is true, it challenges the very notion that consciousness is bound to waking experience. It might not leave the body, but it certainly changes its mode of existence. Then there are the countless reports of people having experiences during sleep that defy explanation. Some claim to have seen events in dreams that later proved real, accidents, deaths, or moments of significance they could not have known about. While many such stories can be dismissed as coincidence or selective memory, a few have been documented in surprising detail. The famous parapsychologist J.B. Rhine studied dream telepathy in the 1930s, conducting experiments where one person tried to send an image to another who was asleep in a distant room. The results were inconclusive but intriguing. Dreamers reported symbols and images strikingly similar to the target picture, more often than chance would predict. Whether or not this proves anything paranormal, it suggests that consciousness in sleep might operate in ways that blur the boundaries between minds. More recently, scientists have begun studying the neural signatures of dreaming in real time. Using EEG and fMRI, they can now detect when someone is dreaming and even estimate what kind of imagery they might be seeing. In one experiment, participants trained to signal with specific eye movements when they became lucid in a dream. Astonishingly, those same eye movements appeared on their EEG recordings, showing that the dreaming mind could intentionally communicate with the waking world. For a few moments, two realities overlapped, one inside the dream, one outside. If consciousness were strictly confined to the physical body, how could it operate coherently across such distinct planes? Another compelling dimension comes from reports of spontaneous out-of-body experiences during sleep. These moments often begin with a loud vibration or buzzing sound, followed by the feeling of lifting or rolling out of the body. Many describe hovering near the ceiling, seeing their physical form below, or even traveling to distant places. Researchers have found that these experiences often occur during REM intrusion, a blending of dream imagery with partial wakefulness. The body remains paralyzed, but the mind becomes aware. Some interpret this as a purely neurological glitch, others as a gateway to expanded states of consciousness. The subjective reality of the experience, the vividness, the clarity, the emotional intensity, makes it difficult to dismiss entirely as illusion. In some ways, the entire question, whether consciousness leaves the body, depends on how we define leaving. If consciousness is non-physical, then leaving may not involve movement through space at all. It might mean shifting from one mode of awareness to another. Think of radio signals. Multiple frequencies exist in the same air around you, but you only perceive one at a time depending on your receiver. When you sleep, perhaps your consciousness tunes away from the frequency of the physical world and begins resonating with subtler layers of reality. From that perspective, sleep becomes less a retreat and more a recalibration, a nightly return to the source frequency from which awareness arises. If this is true, then dreams might not be mere neural noise, but genuine expressions of consciousness exploring alternative realities. Some physicists, such as those who entertain the idea of a multiverse, suggest that every possible version of reality exists simultaneously. The brain, when freed from the constraints of sensory input, could potentially access other configurations of existence. Dreams, in that sense, might be glimpses into parallel possibilities, each one as real in its own domain as waking life is in ours. It's an extraordinary thought that your consciousness, while your body rests, could be wandering through countless versions of reality, touching the edges of existence far beyond what waking perception allows. Of course, it's possible that all of this unfolds entirely within the neural fabric of the brain. But even if that's the case, it still reveals something astonishing about what consciousness can do. It can create worlds, generate emotion, form identity, and perceive meaning, all in isolation from external input. The very same awareness that navigates your waking life can build entire universes out of nothing but its own potential. And when it does, it feels just as real. That means that even if consciousness never physically leaves the body, it transcends it in another sense. It's not limited by physical reality. Consider for a moment the phenomenon of false awakenings. When you dream that you've woken up, perhaps even get out of bed, walk around, only to realize later you're still asleep. These nested layers of awareness show how easily the mind can generate entire realities, indistinguishable from the physical one. You might even feel your body, hear sounds, see light, all without any real sensory input. Each layer feels as authentic as the last. So how can we be certain that waking life is not simply another, more stable layer of dreaming? This idea, proposed by philosophers from Descartes to Chalmers, blurs the line between physical and mental reality even further. What's undeniable is that consciousness has an astonishing capacity to exist across different dimensions of experience. When you fall asleep, awareness doesn't simply vanish, it changes form. It becomes the dreamer, the observer, the traveler. It explores worlds that may be purely mental, or perhaps partly real in ways we don't yet understand. And each time you wake, you return carrying fragments of those worlds, symbols, emotions, intuitions, like souvenirs from another existence. Maybe that's what the nightly journey truly is. Not consciousness leaving the body, but the body releasing its grip on consciousness. For a few hours each night, the mind is free to roam, to create, to dissolve, to remember what it means to exist without limits. The body remains here, steady and still, like an anchor in the material world, while awareness drifts through the ocean of possibility. And when morning comes, the anchor pulls you back. There's a certain quiet mystery in the moments just before sleep, a fading of the world that feels almost sacred. Your mind softens, thoughts become liquid, and something deep within begins to surrender. You might not notice it happening, but in those few minutes, your entire experience of reality transforms. It's as if the conscious self, this steady voice narrating your life, loosens its hold, and another intelligence begins to emerge. That intelligence doesn't think in words or reason through logic. It moves through images, emotions, sensations, and symbols. It's ancient, intuitive, and strangely independent. To some, that transition feels like falling into unconsciousness. To others, it feels like the soul leaving the body to drift through other realms. The question of whether consciousness leaves the body at night has always hovered between two worlds, science and mysticism. Each side describes it differently, but they might be talking about the same thing in different languages. Neuroscience speaks of brainwave transitions, altered connectivity, and states of reduced sensory integration. Spiritual traditions speak of the soul, the astral body, or subtle forms of being, yet both agree that sleep transforms the self. Something profound happens when we let go of our waking awareness. The boundaries between the physical and the non-physical, the self and the infinite, seem to blur. We can start to understand this by looking at the strange mechanics of dreaming. When the mind is cut off from external reality, it doesn't fall silent, it begins to build. The dream world is not random chaos, as once believed. Modern sleep science has shown that dreams draw from emotional memory, visual imagination, and even abstract problem solving. They are meaning-making machines, creating immersive realities out of memory and feeling. And in those worlds, your consciousness acts as both creator and participant. It invents landscapes, weather, people, and even laws of physics, and then forgets that it made them. From a biological perspective, dreams help process emotion, consolidate memory, and prepare the brain for future challenges. But the experience of being in a dream feels far more significant than mere maintenance. It feels like life itself, continuing on a different level. There's a continuity of existence, a stream of awareness that doesn't stop just because the body is resting. When you dream, you move, speak, think, and feel within a reality that's every bit as vivid as waking life. That raises an uncomfortable question. If the brain can produce such convincing realities internally, how can we be sure the waking world isn't another dream? One simply shared and more stable? Philosophers from Plato to Descartes to modern simulation, theorists have all wrestled with this. Perhaps the waking world is just one mode of experience, one layer of reality that consciousness tunes into. At night, when sensory input fades, the mind retunes to another frequency, one where time flows differently, where emotion shapes matter, and where memory weaves the fabric of space. If consciousness is the fundamental field, then the body is merely the instrument it plays through. Sleep may simply be the pause between songs, a moment when the musician steps back to explore other melodies outside the stage of the physical world. Some scientists now believe that consciousness might not originate in the brain alone. The panpsychic view suggests that awareness is woven into the very structure of the universe, that every particle, every atom, possesses a tiny flicker of experience. In that view, your consciousness isn't produced by your body, it's channeled through it. The body focuses awareness into a coherent point, much like a lens focuses light. But when the lens rests, when you sleep, that light diffuses. It doesn't vanish. It spreads. And what we call dreaming might be the experience of consciousness diffused across deeper layers of the cosmos. This theory might sound abstract, but there are fascinating hints of it in experience. People in deep meditation often describe feeling dissolved, as though their sense of being an individual has merged with something vast and timeless. They stop feeling like a person and begin to feel like awareness itself, pure, formless, unbounded. It's the same feeling many report in near-death experiences or moments of great awe. During sleep, when the body is still and the external world fades away, perhaps that same expansion occurs naturally. We simply don't remember it clearly upon waking, because the brain's memory centers are partially offline. In rare cases, though, fragments of that expanded consciousness seem to slip through. People wake in the middle of the night with the sensation that they've just come back from somewhere indescribable, some realm beyond form or thought. They speak of profound peace, or of traveling through light, or of feeling the universe as a single, living presence. These moments often change how they see life itself. Even if such experiences can be explained in neurological terms, they point toward something important. Consciousness, in its purest form, seems to have dimensions we don't yet understand. If you think of the body as a vessel, it's clear that consciousness doesn't always fill it the same way. When you're fully awake, awareness is concentrated, sharply focused on the external world. During dreams, it's diffused, playful, creative. In deep sleep, it retreats into silence. The vessel remains, but the light within shifts its form. Each state is a different configuration of the same underlying awareness. Whether that awareness ever truly leaves the body is a matter of interpretation, but the experience of leaving, the sense of floating, traveling, observing, is undeniably real to the person who feels it. What's intriguing is that these sensations often occur during transitions between states, when consciousness isn't fully here or fully gone. This suggests that leaving the body might not be a destination, but a crossing point. The brain flickers between modes, and for a moment, awareness exists in both. It's like standing in a doorway between two worlds, belonging to neither completely. That liminal quality gives such experiences their power. They remind us that the border between inner and outer, physical and mental, might be thinner than we think. Some traditions claim that these crossings aren't accidents. They can be cultivated. Tibetan dream yoga, for instance, teaches practitioners to maintain awareness through all stages of sleep, including deep, dreamless states. The goal isn't entertainment, but liberation. To realize that the dream body, the waking body, and even the idea of body itself are all projections of the same awareness. Advanced practitioners claim to experience themselves as pure consciousness, moving freely through dream and waking life alike. Modern neuroscience has begun studying these claims, finding measurable differences in brain activity during such practices, especially in the gamma frequencies associated with integration and unity. Perhaps the most radical implication of all this is that consciousness may be the one constant in every state of existence. The body changes, the mind shifts, the world comes and goes, but the witnessing presence remains. Sleep, in this sense, is not a break in consciousness, but a change in perspective. Awareness withdraws from the physical theatre and enters a subtler stage. It observes, learns, and renews itself before returning at dawn. Each night is a miniature death and rebirth, a reminder that consciousness can exist without the body, at least in some form. It's easy to overlook how miraculous that is. You can lose all sense of self, all memory of the world, and yet the next morning, something in you still recognizes your reflection in the mirror. Something bridges that gap. We tend to call that something memory, but memory itself is stored and accessed by consciousness. The continuity that makes you you is not just biological, it's experiential. It's the awareness that keeps returning to inhabit your body each morning, as if stepping back into a familiar suit. Maybe consciousness doesn't leave the body in a spatial sense. Maybe the body leaves it. Each night, as you drift into sleep, the body dissolves from your awareness. It stops existing for you, and yet your sense of being remains. That reversal might be the real clue. It suggests that consciousness is the primary reality, and the body a temporary appearance within it. When the body fades, awareness continues. It doesn't go anywhere, it simply shifts its focus. Every time you wake from a dream, you've crossed worlds. You've returned from a landscape your brain created out of thought and memory, one that felt as real as this one. Each crossing is a quiet miracle, a reminder that consciousness is capable of existing independent of the physical. And maybe that's the deeper meaning of the nightly cycle. Not just rest, not just repair, but a gentle reminder that you are not confined by the body you inhabit. You are something vaster, something that can step beyond the boundaries of flesh and time, even if only for a while. When the world grows quiet and your body begins to rest, there's a subtle shift that happens beneath awareness. Your breathing slows, your muscles loosen, and your mind starts to drift into places that can't be mapped. It's as if consciousness itself slips into a different rhythm, like a current changing direction beneath still water. Scientists have spent decades trying to understand what this shift truly is, what happens to you when you are no longer awake, and whether that you actually stays inside the body at all. To explore this question, it helps to start with what's physically happening. During wakefulness, your brain operates primarily in the beta and gamma frequency ranges, fast, high-energy waves that keep you alert and connected to your surroundings. As you begin to fall asleep, these frequencies slow to alpha, then theta, then delta as the body drops into deeper stages of rest. With each descent, the brain's ability to process external input weakens. You stop hearing the world as sharply. The edges of your thoughts soften. The sense of self, the constant awareness that says, "I am here," begins to flicker. But even as those external signals fade, another form of activity begins to rise. Brain imaging studies show that when we enter dream states, especially REM sleep, areas associated with imagination, emotion, and visual processing light up as vividly as they do when we're awake. Meanwhile, regions responsible for logic and self-reflection go quiet. This means that during dreams, consciousness doesn't disappear. It changes its structure. It becomes fluid, creative, and untethered from the physical world. You might fly, walk through walls, or speak with people who no longer exist, all without realizing that these events defy physics. From the neuroscientific perspective, nothing is leaving the body. Consciousness is simply reorganizing itself, withdrawing attention from the sensory world and directing it inward. But from the inside of the experience, it can feel entirely different. People who lucid dream or experience out-of-body sensations describe the feeling of separating from the body as unmistakably real. They report floating above themselves, seeing their sleeping form, and moving through environments with a clarity that rivals waking life. In lab studies, these states often coincide with unusual patterns of brain activity, synchronized theta and gamma oscillations that may indicate the mind holding two realities at once. So which is it? Is the person's awareness actually leaving their physical form, or is the brain simulating the experience of leaving? The truth might not fit neatly into either category, because to leave implies location, and location itself may be a construct of consciousness. Space, distance, and perspective are part of the mind's framework for organizing experience. When that framework loosens, consciousness might seem to expand beyond the body, not because it has moved, but because it was never truly confined there to begin with. Quantum theories of consciousness have occasionally ventured into this territory, though they remain speculative. Some physicists propose that consciousness might emerge from quantum processes within microtubules inside neurons, a realm where information doesn't obey the classical rules of space and time. If that's even partly true, then consciousness could exist in a state not bound by physical distance, capable of interacting with reality at deeper levels. Sleep, especially REM, could be a time when those deeper interactions become more pronounced, as the brain's rigid boundaries temporarily dissolve. Interestingly, studies on people under anesthesia, in comas, or during near-death experiences reveal that consciousness can sometimes persist even when measurable brain activity is minimal. Patients have described vivid, coherent experiences during moments when their brains showed little to no activity. The common theme among these accounts is the sense of leaving the body, of observing from above, traveling through light, or feeling completely detached from physical existence. Whether or not these experiences prove consciousness survives outside the body, they suggest that awareness can exist in forms we don't yet understand. Dreaming may be a softer version of this same phenomenon, a nightly rehearsal for what consciousness might do when the body is truly still. Every night you practice letting go of the physical. You drift into worlds that exist only in awareness. You interact with people who are not physically there. You wake up with memories of having lived entire lifetimes in other places, only to realize you never left your bed. The boundaries of space and time dissolve completely, yet you remain. That persistence of experience, your continued sense of I am, is the mystery at the heart of it all. Ancient traditions viewed this nightly departure as sacred. In Hindu philosophy, sleep is described as the time when the Atman, the true self, returns to the universal consciousness, Brahman, before re-entering the body at dawn. In Egyptian texts, the Ba, a part of the soul, was believed to leave the body each night, traveling through the realms of the gods before returning with wisdom. In shamanic traditions around the world, sleep and trance are seen as opportunities for the soul to explore non-physical realities, to heal, or to communicate with other forms of life. Though the language and imagery differ, they all describe the same essential pattern: consciousness expanding beyond its physical vessel. Modern science can't confirm such experiences, but it's starting to map their psychological value. Studies on lucid dreaming and meditative sleep states show that people who cultivate awareness during dreams often report reduced anxiety, increased creativity and a greater sense of connection to the world around them. In a way, even if consciousness doesn't literally travel beyond the body, the experience of doing so reshapes how we see ourselves. It breaks the illusion that we are only flesh and bone. It allows us to taste what it feels like to exist beyond physical limits. This idea connects deeply with the phenomenon of hypnagogia, the strange in-between state when you're not quite awake but not fully asleep. In that liminal zone, your mind can produce vivid images, sounds, or sensations that feel both real and dreamlike. Many people experience floating, falling, or even seeing themselves from outside their bodies. Scientists explain this as the brain blending dream imagery with waking awareness. Yet, for those who experience it, the feeling of separation can be so convincing that it changes how they understand consciousness itself. It's as though, for a few seconds, the mind reveals that awareness can function independently of the body's position. The deeper mystery is why these experiences exist at all. From an evolutionary standpoint, they don't offer a clear survival advantage. They might even seem unnecessary. But if consciousness is more than a biological byproduct, if it's part of a larger system of intelligence, then perhaps these states are the mind's way of remembering its own origins. Each night, we rehearse a kind of cosmic return. We forget the body, dissolve into infinite imagination, then reassemble as a self in the morning. It's a cycle of death and rebirth written into every 24 hours of human life. There's also the possibility that consciousness is holographic in nature, that each mind is a localized expression of a greater field. In holograms, every part contains the whole, meaning that even when separated, the entire image can still be reconstructed. If awareness works similarly, then leaving the body doesn't mean traveling anywhere. It means shifting perspective within that greater field. At night, when the filters of the senses lift, perhaps we become aware of more of that total picture. We stop identifying with a single point and begin to sense the vastness from which that point emerges. In that sense, sleep isn't an escape from reality. It's an immersion into a deeper layer of it. Our waking life might be like the crest of a wave, while the sleeping state is the ocean beneath. Consciousness doesn't leave the wave subsides into its source. You might think of it like a spotlight dimming, not disappearing, but broadening until it illuminates everything at once. When you awaken, the light narrows again, focused on a single story, yours. That nightly expansion may be more than a metaphor. Some research into the electromagnetic fields surrounding the body, particularly the brain and heart, suggests that these fields shift during sleep. The heart's magnetic field can extend several feet beyond the body, and its rhythms synchronize with brainwaves during deep rest. Some theorists wonder whether these patterns might act as a bridge between individual consciousness and larger systems of information in the environment. Though unproven, the idea hints that awareness may not be confined to the boundaries of skin and bone. When you close your eyes at night, you surrender control. You release the illusion that you are steering everything, and in that release, something timeless begins to move. Maybe it's not that consciousness leaves the body, but that the body finally steps out of consciousness's way. Freed from its physical anchor, awareness explores, heals, creates, and remembers. By morning, it returns to focus, ready to navigate the physical world again, carrying traces of dreams that hint at the greater ocean it swam through while you slept. It's strange to realize that every night, without fail, you lose control of everything you think you are. The thoughts, the memories, the sense of being a person moving through the world, all of it fades into the dark. Yet somehow, something remains. That something continues to exist in ways science can measure, but not fully explain. In deep sleep, your brain's activity slows almost to silence, yet the body maintains perfect rhythm. Breathing, heartbeat, temperature regulation, even subtle shifts in muscle tone. It's as if an unseen intelligence continues to orchestrate life while you are gone. This is where the mystery deepens. Because if consciousness is just a product of the brain, why does awareness return so seamlessly after total disappearance? Why does it resume as if it never left? One theory suggests that consciousness isn't generated by the brain at all, but filtered through it. The brain, in this view, acts like a receiver, tuning into a frequency of awareness much the way a radio tunes into a signal. When you're awake, that signal is strong, focused through sensory input and thought, but as you drift into sleep, the signal shifts. The filter relaxes. You tune into different channels, dreams, intuitions, impressions, each representing another layer of that universal field. From this perspective, sleep is not a loss of consciousness, but a redirection of it. You aren't fading out, you're tuning elsewhere. It's a provocative idea, but it gains support from certain phenomena that seem to defy explanation through material processes alone. Take the cases of veridical perception during near-death experiences, where individuals accurately describe events or details that occurred while their bodies were clinically unconscious, or the strange synchronicities that sometimes arise from dreams, moments when people dream of events that haven't yet happened, only to see them unfold days later. Science can't confirm that these experiences prove consciousness exists outside the body, but it struggles to explain them entirely through neural activity. They suggest that the mind may sometimes operate beyond the limits of time and space we normally perceive. During sleep, when your brain's sensory gates are closed and the ego's grip relaxes, that broader field might become more accessible. Perhaps the mind's quiet allows the deeper layers of consciousness to surface, layers that are always there but drowned out by waking noise. Ancient traditions have always hinted at this. In Sufi mysticism, sleep is called the little death, a nightly reminder that the self is not confined to the physical body. In Taoist writings, the dream state is seen as a bridge between the manifest and the unmanifest, the form and the formless. Each night, they believed, the spirit roams the realms of subtle energy, learning from the unseen before returning to the flesh. Modern accounts of out-of-body experiences often echo these same descriptions. People speak of rising gently from their sleeping forms, of feeling weightless, of moving through their surroundings with complete clarity. Some even describe seeing their own physical bodies below them, perfectly still, as though they've simply stepped out for a moment. Scientists can reproduce similar sensations in the lab through stimulation of the temporoparietal junction, a brain region that integrates sensory information about body position and orientation. But reproducing the sensation isn't the same as explaining the experience. The human mind might simulate separation from the body, or it might be revealing its ability to exist apart from it. When consciousness detaches from physical input, it no longer needs to obey physical rules. In dreams, you can travel instantly, speak with those who've passed away, or transform into someone else entirely. The laws of physics bend around emotion and intent. Psychologists interpret this as symbolic expression, the subconscious mind sorting through feelings and memories. But for those who experience it, it can feel like entry into another dimension of reality. The more lucid the dreamer becomes, the more those worlds take on a solidity that rivals waking life. It's as though consciousness itself can generate and inhabit realities, not just observe them. This may be one of the most profound clues about consciousness we have. If the mind can create a self-contained universe so immersive that you forget the physical one entirely, then reality as we experience it may depend less on external matter and more on the structures of awareness. Perhaps what we call leaving the body isn't about movement through space. It's about shifting between layers of constructed reality. During sleep, consciousness simply chooses a different set of rules to play by. Neuroscience, of course, focuses on the mechanisms: neurotransmitters, sleep stages, cortical synchronization, but even the most detailed maps of the brain can't capture what it feels like to dream, to drift, to dissolve. The inner experience remains a mystery, one that subjective science struggles to quantify. And perhaps that's the point. Consciousness may never be measurable, because it's the very ground of measurement. The observer cannot observe itself completely. Some physicists, exploring the intersection between quantum theory and cognition, have proposed that consciousness may be a fundamental property of the universe, not an emergent one. If awareness is woven into the fabric of reality, then every night as you sleep, you aren't disconnecting from it, you're returning to it. You're rejoining the ocean from which your waking self is drawn. That's why, for many people, dreams feel strangely familiar, like places they've been before. Perhaps at night, the boundaries that separate the individual from the universal soften just enough for us to glimpse our origin. The symbolism of this is ancient and persistent. Nearly every culture has a myth linking sleep with cosmic journeys. In the Greek tradition, Hypnos, the god of sleep, was the twin brother of Thanatos, the god of death. Two faces of the same mystery. To sleep was to touch the edges of eternity, to rehearse the art of letting go. In Hindu thought, the deep, dreamless state, called sushupti, was considered a direct experience of the ultimate reality, Brahman, where the self dissolves into unity. What modern science calls slow-wave sleep might, in mystical terms, be the self returning to its source. Even in psychology, there's growing curiosity about how consciousness reorganizes during sleep. The integration of memory and emotion during dreaming seems to involve brain regions that also activate during spiritual or transcendent experiences. It's as if the brain itself is designed to periodically unmake and remake the self, to dissolve boundaries, then rebuild them. In that nightly cycle, we might be relearning what it means to exist, over and over again. It's also possible that this process has a protective function. The conscious self, with its constant tension and self-reference, can be exhausting. By allowing it to dissolve each night, the organism resets its identity, releasing the burdens of thought and emotion. The feeling of leaving the body may simply be the psyche's way of symbolizing that release, a deep surrender of control, a temporary return to spaciousness. Whether this spaciousness exists inside or outside the body may not even matter. What matters is that the self expands, and in doing so, heals. If you've ever woken from a vivid dream feeling lighter, as though something invisible has been lifted from you, that's part of it. The nightly expansion of consciousness might be essential for psychological balance. In waking life, we are confined to a narrow channel of perception. In sleep, that channel widens. Consciousness stretches beyond its daytime boundaries, touches something vast, then returns, changed, even if we don't remember why. What's most striking is how naturally this happens. No effort is required. You don't have to believe in anything. The process unfolds on its own, guided by something deep within. Whether we call that biology or spirit may just be a matter of perspective, but the experience of release, of expansion, of existing beyond the body, feels undeniably real. Perhaps consciousness doesn't so much leave the body as remember that it was never entirely contained by it. The body is a point of focus. Sleep is the widening of that focus into infinity. There's a strange paradox at the center of our existence. We live our days anchored to the body, its movements, its sensations, its limitations. Yet each night, we vanish from it. The body remains here, breathing, heartbeat steady. But the sense of I am slips away. You no longer feel the weight of your limbs, the sound of the world, or the boundaries that keep you separate from everything else. It's a quiet departure, one that happens so often we rarely stop to notice. But if you think about it, it's astonishing. For hours each night, you disappear. Science describes this disappearance in measurable terms: changes in neural activity, the silencing of the prefrontal cortex, the dampening of external sensory input. The body enters a maintenance mode while the mind cycles through stages of non-REM and REM sleep. But these scientific descriptions don't explain what it's like. They tell us what the body is doing, but not where consciousness, the sense of being aware, goes when it's no longer engaged with the physical world. Because even though we have mapped the brain in exquisite detail, we still cannot find the place where you reside. In waking life, you experience consciousness as being inside your head, looking out through your eyes. Yet when you dream, that sense of location changes entirely. You may find yourself walking through a city, flying above mountains, or talking to someone you haven't seen in years. You move, feel, and think within those environments, even though your physical body hasn't budged. Your sense of self has transferred into a different space, one that feels just as real as the waking world. And that raises a fascinating question. If consciousness can inhabit a dream world as fully as it inhabits the physical one, then perhaps it isn't bound to either. Some scientists describe this as virtual embodiment. When you dream, the brain generates a simulated body within a simulated world. You feel as though you have arms, legs, a voice, a presence, but these are all constructs of the mind. In that sense, the body you experience in dreams is no less real than the one you experience while awake. Both are mental representations, models of selfhood built within awareness. If that's true, then the line between the physical and the non-physical begins to blur. Perhaps all of reality, waking and dreaming, is consciousness interpreting itself through different layers of focus. Philosophers like Immanuel Kant and later phenomenologists believed that what we call the external world might just be consciousness organizing sensory data. In this view, the body doesn't contain awareness, it participates in it. The mind-body boundary is an illusion created for navigation, not a wall. When we sleep, that illusion relaxes, and consciousness can roam freely through its own architecture. The dream world becomes a canvas where awareness paints without the constraints of physics. Still, the experience of leaving the body can feel shockingly literal. People who have spontaneous out-of-body experiences often describe floating above themselves, feeling vibrations, or hearing a hum before separation. In these moments, they don't feel as though they are imagining anything. They feel as though they have truly stepped outside. Neurologically, these experiences have been linked to disruptions in the brain's vestibular and sensory integration systems, which create the sense of physical location. But that explanation, while compelling, doesn't fully capture the vividness of what people report. Many come back profoundly changed, convinced that consciousness can exist independently of the body. It's worth noting that this sensation of detachment isn't limited to sleep. Astronauts, for example, frequently report overview experiences while orbiting Earth, moments of profound unity and detachment from their physical forms. Deep meditators speak of observing their bodies from above, or feeling as though they've expanded into the space around them. Even certain forms of extreme focus or emotion can dissolve the sense of being a localized self. The body fades, but awareness continues. It's as though consciousness naturally resists confinement, always trying to expand beyond its edges. If consciousness can exist without the body's input, what does that mean for the nature of reality? Some researchers and philosophers have turned to the idea of non-local consciousness, the notion that awareness is a field that exists everywhere, not limited to the brain. In this model, the body doesn't produce consciousness, it interacts with it. Just as a radio receives signals from the air, the brain receives, filters, and translates information from a universal field of awareness. When you fall asleep, the tuning changes. The brain stops processing physical input and begins resonating with subtler layers of that field. Dreams, visions, and out-of-body experiences could all be different expressions of that shift in resonance. This idea, though radical, mirrors ancient spiritual teachings. In many mystical traditions, consciousness is described as a vast ocean, and individual awareness as a wave upon its surface. The wave believes itself separate until it dissolves back into the ocean, something that happens naturally each night. When you sleep, you stop identifying as a single wave. You return to the vastness that birthed you. Then, upon waking, the wave rises again, remembering itself as an individual. But for those hours in between, you are both everywhere and nowhere, one with everything yet aware of nothing. Interestingly, Deep, dreamless sleep might be the purest glimpse of this state. In that stage, there are no images, no thoughts, no sensations, yet something remains. You don't experience time passing, but you awaken knowing that you rested. That knowing suggests that awareness never completely disappears. It merely rests in its formless state. The Upanishads, ancient Indian texts, describe this as the most fundamental level of consciousness, the background from which waking and dreaming arise. Modern neuroscience calls it non-REM slow wave sleep, but even in the language of data, it remains the great mystery of mind. There are moments during the night when transitions between these states create what feels like a window between worlds. Hypnagogic and hypnopompic states, the periods between waking and sleep, can produce extraordinary experiences. You might hear voices calling your name, see patterns of light, or feel yourself floating outside your body. These phenomena are often dismissed as hallucinations, yet they have been reported for centuries by mystics, artists, and ordinary people alike. They may be the mind's way of revealing how fluid consciousness truly is, how easily it shifts between dimensions of reality. Consider, too, how dreams often defy time. You can live through an entire day, a lifetime even, only to wake and realize mere minutes have passed. This distortion might be the mind's natural state when freed from physical constraints. In the absence of sensory input, consciousness bends time to suit its own internal rhythm. Some physicists have even speculated that time itself may be a construct of perception, a sequence consciousness uses to organize experience. If that's true, then when we sleep, we step outside the linear flow and into something timeless. When viewed this way, the nightly act of sleep becomes a kind of initiation. Each night, consciousness returns to its source, sheds the illusions of identity, explores the vastness of its own nature, and then rebuilds the self upon waking. That might explain why we often wake with fresh insights or creative ideas. Consciousness has been roaming through its deeper layers, assembling connections the waking mind could never reach. The physicist Niels Bohr once said that he solved his most complex problems by sleeping on them. Perhaps that wasn't just metaphor. Dream researchers have observed that when people become lucid, aware they are dreaming, they can interact with the dream environment intentionally. Some describe flying, walking through walls, or asking questions to figures who seem to possess their own intelligence. These dream figures often respond with information or insight that surprises the dreamer, as if they have an independent consciousness. Whether they are creations of the subconscious or manifestations of something deeper, they demonstrate the astonishing flexibility of awareness. It can fragment into multiple perspectives, create entire worlds, and then reabsorb them, all within the span of a single night. Perhaps then, the act of consciousness leaving the body isn't about travel, but transformation. It's not about going somewhere else, it's about remembering what you already are. When the boundaries of physical identity dissolve, awareness becomes fluid again, capable of moving through dimensions of experience that waking life keeps hidden. Sleep is not the absence of consciousness, but its expansion into the invisible. Each night, without effort, you participate in a mystery older than humanity itself. You disappear from the world of matter and enter the world of mind. You cross a threshold that no technology can replicate. And when you return, the body greets you like an anchor, familiar, solid, real. But maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the body isn't what grounds you, but what limits you. And each night, when you drift away, consciousness simply remembers its true scale: vast, boundless, eternal. When we think of consciousness, we usually think of something confined, a spark inside the skull, flickering between neurons. Yet again and again, experience suggests otherwise. When people describe dreams, visions, or out-of-body moments, the imagery they use is expansive: floating, flying, merging with light, or seeing their body from above. These are metaphors of release, release from the tight boundaries of self. But what if they aren't just symbolic? What if they describe a real shift in the position of awareness? A temporary detachment from the body that science hasn't yet learned how to measure. The brain, as far as we know, is a collection of electrochemical processes. But consciousness, the thing that sees, feels, and knows, doesn't behave like a physical process. It doesn't occupy space. It doesn't have weight or color. It's invisible, yet it's the most immediate thing you know. You can doubt the world around you, but you can't doubt that you are aware. That paradox has haunted science and philosophy alike. The French philosopher René Descartes believed consciousness was a non-physical substance that interacted with the brain. Others, like modern physicalists, argue that consciousness is a byproduct of complexity. When neurons reach a certain threshold, self-awareness emerges. But this explanation feels incomplete. If consciousness is just what the brain does, then how can people have coherent experiences under anesthesia, during cardiac arrest, or in deep sleep when brain activity nearly vanishes? Accounts of near-death experiences often describe something eerily similar to what people feel when they leave their body at night, a sensation of rising, observing from above, and traveling through a luminous space beyond form. In both cases, consciousness seems to function when the body's systems are almost completely offline. Scientists who study these states have found that they challenge the traditional boundaries of neuroscience. In cardiac arrest patients, for example, measurable brain activity often stops within seconds, yet some later report vivid, structured memories of the moments after they were declared clinically dead. These experiences aren't chaotic or dreamlike. They are often more lucid than waking reality. Could the mind be tapping into a different layer of awareness that exists independently of the physical brain? If so, the body might not generate consciousness, but rather filter it. In waking life, the senses, brain, and nervous system act as a narrow channel, limiting the vast potential of awareness to a manageable stream of information. This idea is sometimes called the filter theory of consciousness. The philosopher Henri Bergson proposed that the brain's primary function isn't to produce thought, but to reduce it, to tune the infinite into the practical. During waking life, this filtering keeps us grounded. But at night, as the filters relax, more of consciousness seeps through. The boundaries dissolve. What we perceive as leaving the body may simply be awareness rediscovering its larger field. This is echoed in ancient teachings across the world. In Tibetan Buddhism, for instance, the practice of dream yoga trains practitioners to remain conscious through the transition from waking to dreaming. They describe entering the dream realm as shifting the winds of consciousness, letting the subtle body travel while the physical one rests. In ancient Egypt, the ba, a bird-like aspect of the soul, was believed to leave the sleeping body to roam freely through the realms of the gods before returning at dawn. Even in early Christianity, mystics spoke of the soul ascending during sleep to receive divine wisdom. These metaphors appear in cultures that had no contact with one another, yet they all converge on the same intuition: consciousness travels. From a modern perspective, this travel could be a kind of quantum migration, not physical movement, but a shift in the informational state of awareness. Theories in quantum consciousness suggest that at the smallest scales, mind and matter might share a common foundation. Quantum events are non-local, meaning they can affect one another instantly across space. If consciousness operates in this domain, then its detachment from the body might not violate any physical law. Instead, it could simply be moving along a dimension of reality that our instruments can't yet detect. Of course, this idea remains speculative, but even in the realm of neuroscience, small hints support the notion that awareness can reorganize itself independently of sensory input. Studies of experienced meditators show patterns of synchronized brain activity that don't correspond to any known waking or dream state. In these moments, practitioners report feelings of being everywhere and nowhere, or observing their bodies from a distance. It's as if consciousness temporarily expands beyond its biological anchor. Interestingly, these states are often described as deeply peaceful. When the mind leaves behind the noise of thought and the sensations of the body, it doesn't vanish, it expands. People report a feeling of unity, timelessness, or merging with light. These descriptions align with what near-death experiencers and lucid dreamers also say. It suggests that there may be a natural spectrum of consciousness, from the deeply embodied state of waking life to the disembodied expanses of dreaming, meditation, or death. Sleep and death, in this view, are not opposites, but neighboring doors on the same hallway. But even if consciousness leaves the body, where does it go? If it isn't floating in space or confined within the skull, then perhaps it moves through a landscape of its own making, an inner dimension constructed of mind stuff. This is the same landscape we encounter in dreams. Its mountains, oceans, and skies aren't material, but experiential. Yet when you're in it, it feels solid and real. Every night, you step into a world generated by awareness itself. That might be the truest definition of leaving the body, entering a realm where the mind becomes the environment. We might imagine consciousness as an explorer, navigating between worlds of different densities. The physical world is dense and slow, bound by space and time. The dream world is lighter, bound by thought and emotion. Beyond even that could be subtler dimensions where awareness moves as pure energy, without form. Many mystics have hinted that these layers exist, stacked like veils, and that we pass through them each night without realizing. Perhaps what we call sleep is just a small glimpse of consciousness traversing these planes before returning to the physical. In this way, leaving the body may not be a single event, but a continuous process. A pulse, like breathing. Every time you close your eyes and drift into stillness, consciousness steps a little further from matter, then gently returns. It's the rhythm of existence itself, expansion and contraction, presence and absence, embodiment and release. You might have felt moments of this even while awake, standing in silence and feeling briefly detached, or sensing yourself observing from a distance, as if your body were just another part of the scenery. These flashes may be micro glimpses of that same phenomenon, reminders that consciousness isn't confined, only focused. When you sleep, that focus widens. Awareness relaxes into itself, and the illusion of separateness fades. It's tempting to think of this as mystical, but it might also be deeply biological. Perhaps the human organism evolved to let consciousness periodically unbind, to keep it flexible and resilient. During the day, we identify completely with the body and its tasks. At night, we dissolve those boundaries and integrate what we've learned. The nightly leaving may be a built-in cycle of renewal, the universe's way of reminding us that who we are is more than flesh and thought. So what, then, is consciousness? Is it the ghost in the machine, the signal the brain receives, or the universe waking up to itself through billions of temporary forms? Maybe it's all of these. Maybe it's something we can never fully define because it's what's doing the defining. The observer can never fully see itself. Each night, when you close your eyes, you are both scientist and traveler, studying this mystery by living it. The body lies still, yet the real journey begins. You drift into another world, carrying with you the faint memory of the physical, the echo of your name, the silhouette of who you were. And for a time, you are free, weightless, formless, awake inside the great field of being that holds everything. And in the quiet between dreams, you may even sense it. Consciousness doesn't truly leave the body. It simply remembers that it was never trapped inside it in the first place. Tonight, as we come to the end of this journey, let's take one last quiet look at the mystery we've been exploring. The question of whether consciousness leaves the body at night. It's a question that, in truth, may never have one clear answer, but perhaps the real beauty of it lies in the wondering itself. Because every time we fall asleep, every time we dream, we are living that question. We are participating in something ancient, something that science can measure but not yet explain, the nightly disappearance of the self. For centuries, people have looked at sleep and seen not just rest, but return. The return of the mind to its source, the return of the self to something infinite and unseen. Each night, the body remains here, breathing, silent, still, but consciousness drifts into a world of pure experience, a realm unbound by time or space. Sometimes that realm is filled with stories, emotions, and landscapes so vivid they feel as solid as the waking world. Sometimes it is an ocean of silence, and sometimes it is nothing at all, just peace. If consciousness truly leaves the body, perhaps it's not a departure in the physical sense. Maybe it's a shift in awareness, a loosening of the boundaries that keep us feeling separate from everything else. When we fall asleep, the mind releases its grip on form, on identity, and returns to a larger field of being, like a wave folding back into the ocean. And when we wake, it rises again, taking shape as a new day, a new self, a new story. Modern science sees this process through the lens of biology and physics, the slowing of neural oscillations, the synchronization of brain waves, the reorganization of memory. But even the most precise instruments can only measure the surface of what happens when we let go of waking life. Beneath the data lies something far more elusive, that sense of slipping out of the physical world and into another, equally real one. Dreams might be the key to understanding this. In dreams, we exist without the physical body. We move through walls, breathe underwater, fly across the sky. We feel emotions and sensations with no external cause, and yet we experience all of it as real. That ability to generate entire worlds from within suggests that consciousness isn't confined to the material. It may use the body as a vessel, but it can also project reality on its own. Perhaps that is what leaving the body really means, not abandoning it, but expanding beyond its limits. Throughout history, mystics and scientists alike have searched for evidence of this expansion. Ancient yogis practiced lucid dreaming and astral projection, claiming that the soul could travel beyond the body while the flesh remained asleep. In modern times, researchers have mapped the brain states associated with these experiences and found something astonishing. They are both real and reproducible. During lucid dreams or deep meditative trances, people can activate regions of the brain linked to self-awareness, while still being fully immersed in an internal world. It's as if consciousness is learning to navigate its own layers. So does it actually leave the body? Perhaps the more accurate question is, does it ever fully return? Because even when you're awake, walking, thinking, speaking, consciousness isn't contained in your skin. It's in the space between things, in the awareness that binds all experience together. The body moves through time and space, but consciousness observes it all from a place outside those limits. Sleep simply reminds us of that truth. When you lie down at night, something profound happens. You surrender. You let the body take over its rhythms, the breath and the heartbeat. You stop holding the world together with your attention. The constant stream of thought slows, and then quietly, consciousness slips into its deeper layers. It wanders through dreamscapes, meets familiar faces, hears voices from nowhere, feels emotions without reason. It explores its own infinity. And when it returns, the body welcomes it back as though it had never left. That cycle, the leaving and returning, is one of the great mysteries of existence. Every creature on Earth participates in it, from the smallest insect to the largest whale. It's a built-in rhythm of renewal, a reminder that life is both material and immaterial. During the day, we build and create, bound by gravity and form. At night, we dissolve back into the timeless. Each side of that cycle nourishes the other. We need the grounding of the body, but we also need the vastness that sleep opens to us. In that sense, sleep is not just a biological function, it's a cosmic act. Each night, the universe asks you to let go, to trust that consciousness will return. And somehow, it always does. That simple act of surrender connects us to something much larger than we can see. Maybe consciousness doesn't leave the body at all. Maybe the body leaves our awareness. When the mind stops identifying with its vessel, it expands into the totality of what it already is. The illusion of separateness fades, and for a few quiet hours, we remember. We remember that we are not just beings in the universe. We are the universe, dreaming of itself. So as you close your eyes tonight, imagine consciousness not as a prisoner of the body, but as a traveler, moving through dimensions of experience that language can barely touch. Every dream, every moment of stillness is part of that journey. Whether you believe consciousness truly leaves or simply transforms, one truth remains. What you are is far greater than what you appear to be. Thank you for joining me tonight on Sleep Space. I hope this journey has sparked curiosity and wonder within you. As you drift into rest, remember that the mystery of consciousness is not something to be solved, but something to be experienced. Night after night, breath after breath, lifetime after lifetime. Good night, and may your awareness travel freely wherever it is meant to go.